Hello and welcome to the world of stories. I'm sure you're here for a bedtime story to help you drift into sleep. And so, let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a woman who wanted more than anything in the world to have a child, but she didn't know where to get one. She went to see a witch about it, and the witch gave her a special seed. The woman planted the seed in the flower pot, and it grew and grew and grew into a bud that looked very much like the bud of a tulip. "What a beautiful flower!" the woman murmured one day, as she leant over and kissed the closed petal. Pop! The bud exploded into an open flower, and there, sitting in the middle of it, was a tiny little girl, no bigger than a woman's thumb. The woman was overjoyed with her beautiful daughter and named her Thumbelina. The woman thought that her tiny daughter was utterly delightful and looked after her tenderly. But one night, a big fat toad came hopping through a broken pane of glass in the woman's window. Thought the toad, as her bulging eyes caught sight of Thumbelina sleeping in half a walnut shell. "She will make a perfect wife for my son." The toad picked up the dreaming little girl, bed and all, hopped away to the marshy river where she lived. The toad swam out to where water ran fast and deep, and placed Thumbelina in her walnut shell on a broad flat lily pad. "Now you can't run away," the toad thought, and she swam away to break the good news to her son. When Thumbelina woke up and saw that she was not only lost, but trapped too, she began to cry bitterly. The fish wiggled up to see what was causing all the tiny ruckus, and they took pity on the sad tiny girl. Quickly and sadly, they nibbled through the lily pad's green stem, and Thumbelina went floating down the river. Soon she was far out of the toad's reach, and still the lily pad raft floated on. Thumbelina sailed past towns and was swept out into the countryside. Thumbelina liked it among the fields. It was sunny and peaceful, and a pretty white butterfly fluttered down to keep her company. Suddenly, a large flying beetle dive-bombed the lily pad and wrapped his legs around Thumbelina's tiny waist. In a flash, Thumbelina found herself sitting on a twig with the beetle high up in a tree, watching her lily pad drift away without her. Hundreds of Beetle's curious friends came crawling out of the bark to peer at what he had brought home. "Ugh! Look, it's only got 2 legs!" the beetle children squealed. "Where are its feelers?" some of the lady beetles murmured. "Hasn't it got a slim bottom?" Other lady beetles gasped in horror, admiring their own round shiny ones. "It is rather ugly," the male beetles had to admit. "Let's get rid of it." And they flew down from the tree with Thumbelina and sat her on a daisy. Poor Thumbelina felt very much like crying, but just then she noticed a little hole in the earth below her that looked very like it was a type of doorway. She jumped down from the daisy and peered into the gloom. "Hello!" she cried. "Is anyone home?" After a few seconds, out popped a field mouse head. She looked Thumbelina up and down and tutted loudly. "Dear, dear," the field mouse scolded, "you look exhausted and hungry. If you're as lost as you look, you're very welcome to stay here with me. In return, you must keep my rooms nice and clean and tidy." So all winter, Thumbelina lived with the field mouse. Every day she washed and swept and scoured and polished, and the field mouse was very kind to her. Although, truth be told, Thumbelina found life rather boring. The field mouse wasn't at all skilled at making entertaining conversation, and neither was her regular visitor, Mr. Mole. Mr. Mole came at once every week in his fine black velvet overcoat. He didn't like to talk. He just enjoyed sitting and peering at Thumbelina through his little short-sighted eyes and listening to her sing. The field mouse was delighted that her friend so liked Thumbelina. "I think he's fallen in love with you," she whispered to Thumbelina excitedly. The field mouse was even more sure that she was right when Mr. Mole invited them both to visit him in his splendid underground mansion. "I have dug a tunnel from your house to mine," Mr. Mole informed them, "so you may come and see me in comfort. Only please close your eyes when you're halfway down the passage, for I am afraid that a dead swallow is lying there." Thumbelina wasn't at all revolted when she came across the dead bird on her first trip to Mr. Mole's house. Instead, she felt pity for the poor thing, lying all stiff and still on the cold earth, while the field mouse ran on eagerly ahead. Thumbelina bent down and stroked the bird's feathers. "Goodbye, sweet swallow," she murmured, and she laid her head on the bird's soft breast. Dup, dup, dup. Thumbelina heard the swallow's heart beating, only very faintly, but Thumbelina knew that the bird was still alive. From then on, Thumbelina found as many excuses as possible to creep away from the field mouth and into the tunnel to care for the swallow. Over the weeks that followed, she placed leaves under the bird's head and plaited a coverlet of hay to keep it warm. She dripped drops of water into its weak throat and fed it tiny morsels of food. And gradually, the swallow began to recover. By the time the weather had begun to grow warmer, the swallow was well enough to stand and hop about. On the first day of spring, the swallow was totally better and extremely grateful for all Thumbelina's kindness. "One day I will repay you," he twittered as he hopped up the passageway and soared off into the blue sky. It was then that the field mouse announced that he had arranged for her to be married to Mr. Mole. "He is very wealthy and will take good care of you," the field mouse beamed. But Thumbelina was horrified. "I cannot live my life underground," she cried, and ran sobbing out into the fields. She held her hands up to the sunshine and looked all around at the flowers, and she felt as if her heart would break. Just then, Thumbelina heard a familiar twittering above her head. She looked up and saw her friend the swallow swooping down towards her. "Come away with me," cried the swallow. "I know a place where you will be happy. I've seen it on my travels." Joyfully, Thumbelina jumped onto his soft, feathery back. The swallow flew off with Thumbelina over villages and roads, lakes and forests, snow-capped mountains, to a land where the weather was always sunny, where the breeze was always warm, and where in every flower there lived a tiny person just like Thumbelina. Thumbelina was so happy in her new home, she even married a handsome prince who lived in a rosebud and who was extremely glad she had never become Mrs. Mole. Best of all, the swallow came to visit every year in September and stayed with Thumbelina and her prince each winter long. That's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. Have a great night. Please like and subscribe if you like my contents. I shall update daily and continue with my best efforts. Good night.